Hello everybody, my name is Magnus, and welcome to Ranking Shining Force 1 characters. I made a video talking about comparing Shining Force characters, and got a few comments on it saying that they were disappointed that I didn't actually rank the characters, or compare the characters in general, rather than what I was talking about was some of the pitfalls that you could run into when you are comparing characters. So now, I'm going to do that with all the Shining Force 1 characters. I have a tier list here, where we have all the characters that you can have, and put them into different tiers, going from S tier, meaning that they are the best characters within the game, all the way down to F tier, where you do not want to use these characters. And I'll be using some of the things I talked about in that previous video. I will be putting a link in that video over to this, as I see that a lot of people are interested in actually comparing the characters, and I want to make sure they get to the right information. The way that I'm going through this, I'm going to compare their basic stats for when you get them, how easy they are to level up, or how easy they are to use at the time that you get them, all the way through to the end game, and how are they at the end game. All of that matters. When it comes to the actual stats, movement is a fantastic stat. I think it's one of the best stats in the game, right alongside the attack stat for those that have a regular attack. If they're a spellcaster, it's going to depend on their spell list. It's going to depend on how easy it is for them to use those spells, how effective those spells are at the time that you get them, and how they are in that end game. And that's pretty much it. So the way that these tiers are, like I said, the S tiers, these are the best units in the game. I would always take them if you have the choice, if you're not doing a special playthrough. Then we go down over to the A tier. These are solid units. There's like one minor flaw that's really leaving them behind those S tier units. Then you have your B tier, where these are solid units. I would normally be able to take them through almost any playthrough. They're going to be fine. They're going to be easy for any new player to use, but they have a couple of flaws with them. You know, a little bit more than the others, but they're still solid units that I would want to take on any of my playthroughs. Then you have the C tier. These units are usable. They just have some major flaws with them. It could be a bad spell list. It could be just not a lot of attack. They could be completely unreliable sometimes. It just really depends. Or it might be that they're very hard to use for a new player coming in. So that's going to be a major factor in this. Then you have D tier, where they can be used, but most of the time you don't want to. There's some horrific flaws with them. And then you have F tier. These units I would not use in almost any playthrough, although I have used them in some of my playthroughs. But these are the worst units. Just do not take them. And you're gonna, just to let you know, one of them is a joke unit anyway, and there's only one other unit that falls into that. And I'm sure you can guess who I'm going to say that is, but we'll get to that when we get to that. I'm going to start off with who you get in the beginning, all the way to who you get at the end, just about their order, because some of the order is a little mixed of depending on how you do things, but in general, this is from beginning to end. When you get them is how I'm going to go through, and we're going to go through and start off with Max. So Max is your main character. You're forced to deploy him, so you kind of have to use him, and he's important because if you lose him, he's the only character that will cause you to restart because he died. So you're going to lose half your money, which is a pretty hefty penalty whenever you lose him. And then you have to continue on with the battle. Fortunately for Max, he's actually a pretty good character. He's got 6 move, which is good. So when he's moving through terrain, he's minorly hampered down to 3 movement, but so he can get past some things. And when I'm talking about these characters, I'm going to be talking about them as if they could get their best weapons. This is a little bit weird with the sword users, because technically the Birdman can have the Sword of Light, the Chaos Breaker, the Sword of Darkness, but I'm going to assume that the Chaos Breaker is with Max, because normally in the playthroughs that's just generally how it's going to work. If you're doing a speed run, you may just put the Chaos Breaker over onto Balbaroy. There's like little tricks and things you can do with that, but otherwise we're going to go give it to Max. And when Max has that Chaos Breaker, or when he has the Sword of Light and everything, no matter what his attack is as you go through, which is going to be kind of low actually in the mid-game, yeah, pretty much just the mid-game is when he's going to really suffer. He's going to really want a good weapon, and swords just have a hard time during the mid-game. Once he picks up that Chaos Breaker, it kind of fixes all of that. If you saw through my Let's Play, my Max was really struggling going up to the Kain fight, and that kind of happens with a lot of playthroughs. If you don't get enough experience a little bit earlier on, you're going to suffer with his attack, and then I had to promote him because he was going to have the same attack anyway, and I needed him to spike somewhere. So I had to promote him during the Kain fight at level 12, and then he had low defenses at that time. The good part is, later on, Max will get tanky, and he will survive, and once he has a Chaos Breaker and the Sword of Light, it fixes his issues. He gets a magical attack in there. So he's pretty good. He just has some flaws. His really big flaws are in the mid-game. He really suffers unless you have either grinded him or have spent a lot of effort actually getting him kills over some other units. So he has some reliability issues within the mid-game, but otherwise he's actually still a good unit. Has a high attack and a high defense in the end game. And in the beginning he's pretty good. Swords don't have that much of a problem. So I'm actually going to go through and put him in the A tier. Again, I'm considering the Chaos Breaker is his, whereas the other units, they get whatever their best weapon is, whether it's the Valkyrie, the Katana, you know, anything like that. They all get it. But Max is a good, solid unit. You're going to use him anyway, and there's some good things with him. But he's definitely not the best unit that you have. He has some problems in that mid-game. Next we have Luke here, and we're going to talk about some things with Luke that also pertain to Gort. Essentially, they are going to be the same unit. Luke, you just get right off the bat. He's got that movement the same way that Max has it. He can wield axes and swords, which is actually really good in this game. It solves a lot of the problems that sword users have in the mid-game, because you get some axes that give him minor boosts in attack over the sword, which helps with the reliability. It means he can constantly increase his attacks. When you're a weapon user, when you get your next weapon, usually that's a big boost in there, because they generally do not get a ton of attack. And Luke and Gort are one of those that actually have a decent attack anyway. He tends to be very tanky, a middling amount of HP, so sometimes you have to watch out for magic, but most of the time, he's not that bad with it. He's able to take a few spells, and he'll be able to do well for you. The major problem that we have with him is that although he has those good stats and everything is just good, and nothing is fantastic with his stats. Like I said, they get to be a little bit tanky, but there are plenty of other units that are tankier than him, and same thing with Gort. And then he doesn't have a ranged option. They do get axes that have some spells with Blaze 2 and Blaze 3 for your Heat Axe and your Atlas, respectively, but they don't but beyond maybe the first couple of battles that you have with them, with those spells available, it's not really doing too much. And especially at the end game, it's meaning nothing for him. The good part is that both of them have the Atlas available, because there's 2 of them. So you could even bring both of them. They are good, solid units that have a little bit of issues. Maybe if they had a little bit better movement, then they'd been awesome. If they had, some of the highest attack in the game or highest defense in the game, then they'd be awesome. But they're just good, solid units. I'm just gonna put Gort up there. You get him 2 battles after Luke, and he's level 2 when you get him. So a little bit behind, but they're essentially about the same. I think that there's minor differences between them in the end game, and it really doesn't matter. There's just good, solid units. I think any new player should definitely use them all the way through, because they're going to be useful for you, but the veterans are going to know that there are other characters that are a bit better, because they can use them in different ways. Then we have Teo. Teo is a fantastic mage. She is your Blaze mage. You get her right off the bat. Magic is very useful, especially in the beginning, because it does almost a set amount of damage. There's only certain bosses have resistances, and then there's certain enemies that do, but there's also certain enemies that have weaknesses to it. The only problem that we have is that Teo has only Blaze as her attack spell, and that is the weakest of the 3 different attack spells that you can have between Blaze, Freeze, and Bolt. But she learns Blaze 4 really quickly at level 20, whether you promoted her level 10, which I would never recommend for a mage, just get her up to level 20, or you promote her to level 10 and then got her up to level 10 afterwards. She has a high MP, she has high agility, so she's one of the few that actually has really high agility, so she's almost guaranteed to go first or around the first of each turn, which is actually pretty good on her end. The problem with mages is that they have a low movement of 5. You can try to fix that with a ring, but you can give the running ring to anybody else, or the running pimento to anybody else anyway. So you have to take that into factor. And unfortunately with Blaze 3 and 4, for her spell list, she doesn't have the 2 to 3 range of the other spells, and that's kind of what's hurting her. But the good part about her is she can use Blaze 4 when she gets it pretty often, because it only costs 8 MP and she has a high MP pool. So that is something major to consider. She's a very useful unit. I rank her over in the A tier. She has a couple of flaws with those. She doesn't have the best spell list, but she does have boost, she does have Blaze, and she learns it really quickly. You get her right off the bat. She's useful immediately, and she doesn't really peter off until near the end game, where you stop one-shotting some types of enemies. But you're going to one-shot a lot of enemies with Blaze 4, so she's going to be useful all the way through. So I think she's just a very easy unit to use, and she just doesn't have some of the best stuff, and that's why she ranks in the A. Hans, I will tell you, I love my archers. They do have a low movement, but they move a little bit better through the forest, so they can keep up in a lot of the terrain maps, which we do have a lot of them, so that does matter. They get 2 to 3 range, which is really good. I will tell you, it is really good, and anybody can be useful if they get the Buster Shot. It adds plenty of attack, so anybody with a middling attack, such as any of the archers that you get, which is unfortunately Hans, in this case, he is going to be fine in the end game. The problem is that you do not get enough arrows to help his attack throughout the game, because he basically gets none. He barely levels up his attack stat ever, so he generally is only doing a middling amount of damage until he gets to the next arrow. Then he's actually doing really good, and then he peters off again. And the same thing can kind of be said with Diane, but Hans you get right off the bat, and he's actually doing good at the time that you get him, and for a little bit afterwards. And he just is okay as he's going through, and that's the unfortunate part, is that he's only okay, and he's not very survivable. You cannot bait with this unit, and if you bait too much, and your knight will take out units, he's going to be one of the ones that gets attacked and killed. He doesn't have good defenses, doesn't have good HP, so he's a bit hard to use. I'm going to rank him into the C tier. Now, as a beginning player, if you started with you could start with your first 12 people you get within the game, and you're going to be fine. You're going to be fine. And I'd say that go ahead and use the archer, because it is a niche that he fills, because he has that ranged attack. He can shoot from behind the front line that you have. But with a lack of massive movement, and with a lack of the attack power, he just kind of falls really short. So I put him over in the C tier because he just doesn't work well. Then we have Ken. Ken is your first knight that you get out of the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of them. You get 6 of them. But he's the first one that you get. Ken is an interesting character. He barely gains any defenses in the beginning. He gains a ton of HP, which makes him very useful for baiting magic users. Believe me, it actually really is very useful for him. And he ends up being one of the higher attackers when it comes to the knights. And most of the knights, so when I say most of the knights, we're going to talk Ken, Mei, Ernest, and Vankar. So out of those 4, most of their stats are about the same. There's some minor differences, and I'll talk about those minor differences, but Ken tends to have a higher attack out of those 4. I think that Ernest has the highest in general at the same levels, but Ken generally has a higher attack, has a high HP, low defense. They have the awesome 7 move. The unfortunate part is they get reduced down to 2 move during terrain, which really, really hampers them down, especially since there's a good amount of maps that have terrain in this, so it really hampers the knights. But he's very useful when you have those open fields, and because he has a high HP, and that does matter, especially later on when you have those attacks that bypass defenses anyway, he is pretty useful. And he is going to be ranked in the B tier, because he's a good, solid unit that you could have. He's going to be reliable throughout the game. And I would definitely use him throughout the game. You just have to be careful with the regular attackers, because sometimes, because he has that low defense, doesn't matter how much HP you get, if you're taking, 40 points of damage, you're going to be taken out in 2 hits anyway, just like anybody else. So you have to be careful about that. But generally, he's pretty good, solid unit. Then we get to Lo, and everybody knows what I think about Lo. I'm going to put him right into the C tier. And I think some people might be questioning why I'm not putting him over in the D tier because of how low I rank him. But there's one good thing about Lo, and that is he is a healer. Healing is very useful. You get to keep up the units that you have out in the field, meaning that some of your best units can stay the best. You don't need another unit. This unit keeps the best units out there, so that you don't have to bring a weaker unit. I mean, think about it. If your top 1, 2, 3 units that are all up in this S tier are kept alive, that should be better than having a 12th unit. If you're going through and you're ranking out of 32 characters, not 32 characters. Is it 32? Whatever. If you're ranking out those, your 12 units really kind of just like, oh yeah, they're good. No, I'd rather keep the best units out there, and that's what he has. He just has the worst of the healer spell list. And the good part is he has a ton of MP, but he's not survivable, so you have to be careful with him. And he does have that worst list. He only has heal. He has no aura, and he has no other really good spells on him. His spell list really just sucks. So that's why he ranks in the C tier. A newbie could actually use Lo, and he'll be fine. perfectly fine for you, but he just doesn't do that well. And as I'm going through here, I am going to be placing them in a somewhat order here. And actually, I would do that, of where I would rank them within the tiers. I think, yeah, I'll put them into that. I think that these guys are more reliable than Ken, because of his defense issues. Hans, I do like over Low. Low's kind of on the low C. And Teo, I would actually take over Max almost any time, because Blaze 4 is that good. And, you know, all of her spells are useful through there. Anyways, back over to Gong. So Gong, he's an interesting character. He is the most survivable healer that you have, because he is a semi-front combatant, semi-healer. And he has a decent spell set with just heal up to heal 4 and Aura 1. That actually brings him over Low with that. And because he's survivable, that's some good points to have for him. But don't be fooled, his attack is still pretty low most of the time. You can spike his physical side, but it does generally make his magic side suffer. And it's very unreliable. He's very unreliable on his attack. As much as I love Gong, and I really do love Gong, he most of the time is not going to fight very well, and his healing kind of suffers. And he gets RO1 pretty late, so he generally doesn't have a good spell list for most of the time. But I do rank him over Low. He does fix a lot of the problems that Low has. The only major issue with him is that he's not reliable on whether he's going to be a good healer or a good attacker, and generally he's going to have lower MP than Low, meaning that he's going to be able to heal less. But he can heal with some items and blah blah blah. He'll be okay. I think anybody could use him, and he's perfectly fine. But he's got some major flaws. Then we go over to the next knight, Mei. You get her, 2 chapters in at level 2. Same thing with Gort, which is perfectly fine. That's easy to get up and use. She has the reverse issue with Ken in the beginning, where she has high defense and lower HP, which is great against the physical units and then terrible against magic. And otherwise, so she ends up having less attack than Ken for a lot of the time. And then she kind of catches up. At the end game, she's weird. She flips. She goes to having some of the highest HP. And then her attack, catches up. And especially if you use the Valkyrie. Anybody with the Valkyrie is going to be good. So I'm going to rank her. I'd say these two are almost alongside each other. They have opposite issues for a while, but Ken, actually Ken's going to be up a little bit ahead, because Ken generally has more attack than Mei throughout the game, and she kind of catches up rather than exceeding him. So she's still easy to use, but has some major flaws in there, or some a couple of minor flaws in there. She has lower HP, so the magic kind of affects her. Again, the movement thing with them is kind of shaky. Sometimes it's great, sometimes it's awful. But she does have the tankiness, and she's still going to be useful. You're still going to do damage with her, especially as you get more weapons. She'll be perfectly fine. Then we have Chris. Chris, you get her level 2 after the fourth battle that you have. Still in chapter 1. So getting her a little bit late at that point in time. Most of your characters are beyond level 2, except maybe Low, by that point in time. And she's another healer, so you have 3 healers right off the bat in chapter 1. But Chris can learn up to Aura 2. She has the full heal set. So she has a little bit better healing. She does have Quick, which means that she can cause another unit to have increased agility and defense, which can be very useful. Not against the later, in the late stages of the game, but in the mid game to, early late game, you still have a lot of regular attackers. That higher defense may be very useful for you. But overall, she has a pretty good healing set. The only problem is she comes a little bit low in HP, she is low in HP. She comes a little bit low in level, but to be quite honest, I mean, if you saw my playthrough, I was using low. Going through and healing, using low, but she was the same level as him. He just had a little bit of experience over her. So, if you're doing a regular playthrough, where you're just not trying to restart battles or retry battles, you're going to be generally better. And again, she has a better spell list, so I'm going to rank her as a B because she gets that Aura too, which is phenomenal. Having that range with Aura, so healing a big group with it, is phenomenal to have, and you're not going to go wrong with her. Again, all of your healers are frail, so that's fine. You just have to keep them protected. So it's just a good, solid unit. We have Anri next. So Anri is the next mage that you get. She does have some flaws. When you start off, again, she's a mage, so the movement thing is a problem. And she starts off at level 4 when you get her, and by this point in time, this is after the first battle in Chapter 2, your other units like Teo are going to be a little bit higher level, probably, than her when you get her. And she takes a little bit to actually get the spell set that you need. So she learns all 3 attack spells. So Blaze up to level 2, Freeze up to level 4, she's your Freeze mage, and then Bolt up to level 2, and her other spell doesn't matter. She has a great spell set in that, but it takes her a little bit to get to the point where that's useful. Probably, if you focus on her, you're probably going to, by the end of the battle that you have with her, she's going to get Freeze. She doesn't start off with it, and then later on as you go through, she'll be getting the spells, the level 3 spells and level 4 spells a little bit after Teo. But Anri is the best mage, and here's why. One, she gets up to Freeze level 4. It has that 2 to 3 range with Freeze 3 and 4. And it does a good amount of damage. It does more damage than Blaze. And it only costs 2 MP more. It will one-shot pretty much everything except for blue dragons and bosses. And you're going to have it by the time that you get to those. By the time that you actually need Freeze 4, you're going to have it. If you're using her just as much as you're using Teo, so if I'm spreading out usefulness for everybody, she's going to get it at those times. And to be quite honest, as you see through my playthroughs, my mages generally gain levels quicker than all the others because they're just that good. They're able to take out units that well and deal a huge amount of damage to an area. They gain experience quickly and they become super powerful. And Anri later on actually becomes really tanky. She's not the tankiest mage, we'll get to him, but she does become fairly tanky. So you just have to watch out later on. Though in the beginning she's still frail, with just like any other mage and healer, but as you move on, she starts to gain a lot of defense. So then you have to just watch out for the attacks that bypass defense. But you're supposed to be watching out for the mages anyway. So she's just more survivable than your other mages. So that's why she ranks the S tier. Yes, there are a couple of flaws. They're inherent with the class. But she is so powerful and so useful that it doesn't matter. She is just one of the best units that you can use. And as long as you treat her just like you would treat Teo, just like you treat any of the other units, you're going to be fine. She's going to be fantastic for you. One of the best magic users that you have. Or she is the best. So that's why she's the first one that goes in the S tier. Teo is just a little bit behind it. I've been going back and forth about this because Teo is just super useful and learns Blaze Force so quickly and casts it so many times. But Henri, she's able to cast her Freeze 4 almost just as much because it only costs 10. So it only costs 2 more than for Teo. By the time that you're using it, you're able to cast it 4 or 5 times. So it's just going to be so useful for you. And her end game is so much better. Because you know you're going to one-shot things rather than you might one-shot things. And that 2 to 3 range is phenomenal. And using the Bolt 2 for her is actually really good. It creates this very large area effect that if you're not looking to kill a single unit that you want to damage a bunch, either to weaken for other units, or maybe they're all already weakened and you can take them out. It's extremely useful, and very good for her for if you need a little bit of experience. Then we have Arthur. Arthur is trash. You get him at level 4, and he is just, maybe like a couple of points in like attack, HP, defense better than Ken at level 1. And he's behind every other unit that you have. He is awful when you get him. He is a struggle to level up as you go through because he doesn't gain very well in the beginning. And then you start getting to, between levels 10 and 20 unpromoted. And don't ever promote him to level 10, he won't be useful. But you promote him between levels 10 and 20, and he starts gaining a bunch of stats, and you're like, wait a second. Is he catching up to everybody? And he catches up to everybody, and then you promote him, and then he sucks again. Not terrible if you promote him to level 20, but he's still going to be behind a bunch of units, and then you start seeing what he is. After promotion, he is a spike unit. He just gains a ton of stats as he goes through, and in the end game, technically, he will probably be your strongest knight. But getting him up there is a chore. He's not useful during that time. I could use almost any other unit. I say almost, because there are some that are going to be below him, but almost any other unit, and they're going to do way better than him. He does have a unique part where he can cast some spells, but they're only level 1 of those spells, of Blaze, Freeze, and Bolt, which Bolt is the other one that's actually pretty useful, besides the fact that they actually give him some damage, probably more damage than he's going to do at those times, when you kind of want to use them. Than with his regular attack, but he is just trash. So he goes down to the D tier. A beginner, like, if you're grinding and everything, Arthur's probably going to be fine for you. But if you're not trying to grind, he's just a chore to bring up. And I would only use him just because you would want to have, like, the best unit technically at the end of the game. But you don't need that. He's going to be so hard for you to use all the way up to that point. You get him in chapter 2. You have 6 other chapters. 6 other chapters that get him through, and 5 of those chapters he's going to be a useless pile of trash too. He's okay, and that's it. So that's why he ranks so low in here, and that's why I didn't like that video comparing all the different characters and comparing endgame stats, because that doesn't matter most of the time. It's how you get up to there that matters. And if you're still good all the way up to the end game, then you'll be fine. What you need in the end game is actually not that high of stuff, and Arthur struggles to get up there for the longest time, and then finally shoots past, once he's like level 10 promoted after you promote him to level 20. That's not going to be useful for you. Then we go over to my Birdmen, and I'm just going to go through and place them here. And yeah, I'll place them here. And here's the reason why. Everybody knows that I love my Birdmen. I love Balboroy. I mean, that's my avatar that you can see. What's useful about them is that they have 7 movement, so they have the most movement in the game. They can fly, so they can bypass any terrain penalties that are going through, so they can move most of the game. And that is just so useful that I cannot rank them any lower. The reason why I rank Balboroy over Eamon is that despite the fact that as you get through the game, there's not much difference between them. The difference is that Balboroy generally has more attack than Eamon. And with them being flying units that have an okay defense, and they don't benefit from any of the terrain, so you have to be kind of cautious with them for their survivability. You want them to have a higher attack. And in general, he meets a lot of benchmarks that Eamon doesn't as you go through. So you're going to want to give the katana over to Balboroy after promotion. And between the two, I mean, you could use the two. Trust me, you could definitely use the two, and you're going to be happy that you do. Because they're going to be able to fly over obstacles and take out enemies that you need them to take out. And as long as they get enough attack as they go through, and I would definitely boost them, give them the power ring, you know, all that stuff, they're going to be able to take out those enemies that are going to cause you trouble. And they can help you finish maps really quickly, especially the ones that you have to trudge through with terrain. Again, they do have some weaknesses where their survivability is kind of an issue, and their attack isn't the greatest, but they just are so infinitely useful with being able to get to the enemies that you can't normally get to, or even attack from a side that you can't attack otherwise. That I can't rank them any lower. Again, Balboroy just has more attack than Eamon, and the defenses really don't matter in this case. Eamon doesn't really survive more than Balboroy. Eamon does catch up in attack to Balboroy eventually, but it does take a little bit. So that's why they're here. Diane, when you get her, I'm going to put her right alongside Hans. Just think of them as equal here. When you get her, you get another archer, and you don't have the same problems that you had with Hans. Hans, when you for the first 5 level ups, you get nothing, and then you get like I think a point in agility or a point attack. Then, where Diane, you don't really get those same types of level ups. But the problem is that probably by that point in time, they're about the same level, and they're essentially the same unit. If you replace Hans with Diane because you think she's better as a unit, you're wrong. They're the same. They're not going to have almost any difference in their stats. You just don't have the same problems of Hans taking forever to finally get level ups that matter. Diane, you don't have to go through that with. So if you're not really using Hans and your Hans didn't really gain that many levels, then replace with Diane. Perfectly fine. But if you think that she's just better because you level them both up, and oh wait, she's not struggling to gain something. Well, no, they're gonna end up the same. So that's why I rank them over here. Same things apply to each of them. Next we have Xylo. And Xylo, this is very painful. I'm putting him over in B tier. He's gonna be at the high end. And it's very painful for me because I love Xylo, and he's an awesome character. And he's got a lot of things going for him. He ignores Forest, and he has 7 move, which means that, especially in the chapter that you get him, it's great presentation for this character. It means the chapter that you get him, he's able to move 7 all the way through, which is phenomenal. He's going to outpace almost all of your other units besides your flyers. And you can kind of use him as such in that battle. And even later on, I mean, you don't have, whenever the knights are good, he's good, and then he's better during the terrain maps. But there's some reliability issues with Xylo, as we have seen. Xylo has a high attack when you get him, and is survivable when you get him. And it's great, like I said, it's a great presentation of when you get him, and for that mid-game, he's pretty good. And then he peters off, because he doesn't have a weapon, and it really makes him suffer. The reason why that matters is, for the other units, the weapon matters more than their own attack growth, because they get more attack from the weapon than their base attack, whereas Xylo has to rely on his attack gains. So, if he doesn't gain attack in some levels, he actually falls way behind in his attack stat, because that's the only thing he relies on. Now, he does gain more attack than the others, because he has to, and he can end up pretty well, but it's kind of a die roll of whether his attack is good enough, or if it's great. And that's a problem. That's his major issue, is that unreliability with his attack, because that's what you're going to want to do. And he's survivable when you have him in the beginning, but he doesn't really gain a ton of defense or a ton of HP as he goes through. He just ends up being okay. He's definitely behind these two. He's kind of, and he doesn't really fall in the line of here. He's kind of in between these two, which aren't as high as these two when you average that out. So Xylo is okay on the survivability, but if he can't attack, if he doesn't have enough attack to actually get through the enemies and tear them up like he should be able to, then he's going to have some issues. And that's why he ranks in the B tier. I think that any beginning player should definitely use Xylo. He is one of my favorites, and he's reliable, especially in the time that you get him. And you know what? If he drops off, you can replace him with a better unit at that time if you need to, because he will be useful at least for a while. So I definitely think that he belongs over here. He's in the higher end of this. Alright, next we have Pele. And he goes right up to the S tier. I think I'll arrange here, because it's easier to use Henri than Balbaroy. There's a lot of differences between them, but they're both very useful. Pele goes up here. Pele is an S tier unit because, one, he is a knight, so he's good on a lot of different maps, especially the maps that afterwards that you get him. They really encourage a lot of high movement during that time for a while, and then you get to some terrain maps where he kind of falls off. But Pele, when you get him, is a level 8 knight, so he's below the level of Xylo. So you're like, huh, that's a little interesting. He is outclassing every single unit that you have. He has such good base stats that he is crushing any competition that he has. And that's going to stay for a while. You're going to notice he doesn't gain much as you level him up. And that's the point. Pele has a lot of great base stats, and then he doesn't gain much. And he doesn't need to. As you go through and level him up, it's only in the end game where he becomes just as good as these guys, but it's so effortless to just use him. He's so strong that he outclasses everybody, and they finally catch up to him at the end. And he's like, okay, finally, you can choose any of us and you'll be fine. But because he's that good, when you get him, and he will stay good all the way through, he's the most reliable unit that you have. For any beginner, I would absolutely use Pele the entire time. You will not you will not regret that. He will be the easiest unit for anybody. So he doesn't end up being the best, but he's going to be good no matter what. And he's the best unit that you have that you can promote at level 10 and use him still through the end game. He will still have great stats. In fact, he doesn't gain too much benefit for promoting a level 20, but I do like having the extra level ups if you're going to use him the entire time. So he's just a phenomenal unit. He's the only major problem that he has is once the terrain comes around, then he's going to have some problems. But otherwise, he's just fantastic. Then we get another knight, Vankar. It's about, at about the same time. At level 8, and he's going to match up with these two. But the problem is, with these two, you've had them for a while, and they're probably more leveled up. They're more leveled up than Pele, but Pele is still going to outclass them. Vankar is, as powerful as these two, somewhere in between on their defenses and HP and everything. As powerful as those two, but probably lower level. And that's why he goes here. He's useful. Just meh. in all honesty, he's just it's just hard because you have all these other units that you've already had. So you've got your 12 units right here, and I don't think he he doesn't stand out versus these guys. Now he's good with the movement that he has for that battle, since he has a high movement and it's very open-ended. Again, same things that apply to Pele apply to him for movement, but there's kind of the question of, well, why? Because he doesn't outclass anybody otherwise. Now Kokichi, you get him actually level 7 at the same time. You get a bunch of units all at once. And he's another lance user. Kokichi's a weird guy, because he does fly. He flies at a speed of 6, so he's a little bit behind your other flyers, but he does get a ranged attack, which is good. And he grows like your flyers. He kind of works like your flyers. But he tends to be a lower level than what they are. And he can be a little bit hard to use for some players, because I actually think his defense is a little bit lower than the other flyers, your birdmen here, for when you get him, and so he needs a little bit to grow. But he grows just the same as them, so he can end up being as good as the birdmen, just with a little bit lower movement. You know, with 1 point lower movement, which does matter in the long term of a individual battle, even though he has a ranged option. So he's a range of 7 each time. These guys are moving, or ranges 7 to 8. These guys are moving 7 each time. He's moving 6 each time. So he will fall behind these two. Just a little bit though, because the maps aren't that big normally to really warrant that as very problematic. And I'm gonna rank him over pretty highly on a B tier. I think a veteran knows how good Kokichi can be, and will use them. Going through and flying, being an extra flyer is always useful. But for a beginner, they may have some troubles with him. They're not going to realize how he's supposed to be used, and because of that frailty that he has, it's going to be pretty difficult, especially since he falls behind these two. But you know, if you get a flying, you know, Valkyrie user, he will be awesome once you get to that point. But you got to get there, and he's a bit more of a struggle than these two. They're useful in the battles that you get them, and to reach enemies that you can't normally reach, and they're going to gain levels, and they're going to be a higher level than Kokichi, and that's why he falls lower than these two. Yogurt is a joke character, so he goes down to the F tier. I mean, statistically, he is the worst character. You cannot argue that. But he's meant to be. He's a joke character. You could turn your entire party into hamsters. It's hilarious. So I'm just gonna rank him there because he's here. Guntz. Now, Guntz has a whole term in the community that is named after them. Named after him. Guntz-like. Because Guntz is an awesome tank. Yeah, he's a literal tank. He's got a good amount of attack. He doesn't have the best, but he has a good, solid attack. That cannot be argued. And he's got the best defense in the game. There's nobody that has defense like him. He's a little low on the HP. He is pretty survivable, but especially in the end game portion, you're just hoping that they don't use their attacks that bypass the defense, which is most of their attacks. So he kind of falls off at that point in time, even though he has the high tankiness. But he has enough HP to survive at least one of those hits. 2 of them if it's from the robots most of the time. But you know, kind of just fall off at that point. And he has a very low movement. He does ignore terrain, but he moves at 4. So you would need to, unless you're just slowly trudging through each and every battle, trying to keep your party together. He's going to fall behind. And then you would need to use the items for him when you could use them on your flyers to make them fly even farther. So he ranks over in the B tier. I'm actually going to put him below these two. And here's the reason. The movement really he suffers on. They all probably have about the same attack. He has higher defense, but they also have at least a ranged option, or a magical option on top of having higher HP on top of that movement. So even though he's a good, solid unit to have, and I love Guntz. And any beginner is going to love using Guntz, because during the time that you have him, that you're only worried about the mages at that point. And they're good. he's good during that point, and that point up until, like I said, about the end game is where he really falls off. Whereas these two, they're still good during that time. They're still solid all the way through, and then they don't have that fall off point at the end, where he really kind of does. But he is fun to use. I suggest using him as a new player, even if it's just for a little bit. He can be very useful. It's just that movement kind of sucks. Then, right alongside, you do get Domingo. Domingo, what do I do with this guy? He's very weird. I am going to actually place him. I'm going to place him here, and this is the reason why. Well, no, I'll place him above Guns. I'd probably use him over Guns, if I were going to take from the top down here. Here's the reason. Domingo is the best magic user when it comes to movement and a lot of other stats. You get him at level 1, but that doesn't matter because he doesn't promote, so just imagine him as a promoted character there. And he can fly, which is fantastic. He still only has 5 movement, so that is, you know, he just doesn't suffer from the penalty of the terrain and, you know, any blocking terrain. He could fly right over it. But he only starts with Freeze 1, and at the time that you have that, like, these two at least have their level 2, maybe level 3, by that point. And he takes forever to get to his spells. I mean, it took forever to get up to Freeze. It takes forever to get up to Freeze 4. You got to get him up to level 26. 26 levels at that time. When you're already halfway through the game, is a pretty, you know, big order. And although he has Freeze up to level 4, and he's a great survivable great survivable mage, because he is survivable. He gains a huge amount of defense, a good amount of HP. You don't worry about the survivability of him. He just, despite that, and despite the fact that he could cast Freeze level 4 a ton once he gets it, he just doesn't get it for a long time. And that makes him suffer. He's not able to kill an individual unit most of the time unless they are weakened. And that is a problem. Now, I love Domingo. I love using him. Most of the time, you're going to see me use these 3 mages anyway. That's why he's ranked in the B tier. He has major flaws. You know, he has a major flaw, but he's still good despite that. Despite the fact that you get him a level 1 with Freeze 1. I mean, it takes him even 5 levels to get to Freeze 2. If you got it at the next level, then it'd be a little bit better. But, you know, it takes him 5 levels to get to that, and it takes him, like, another 6 levels or so to get to Freeze 3, and then it takes forever to get up to that. And his other spells, he does get boost, so that's good. Can you know, raise attack? Same with Teo, but you know, it just he suffers in comparison to those mages. And then there's, you know, I would probably use some other units that are more useful than him, you know, for his first 12 levels. So that's just my take on him. If you're grinding, Domingo is easy to grind. He gains experience like no tomorrow, up until level 20. He gains it faster than anybody else. But you know, if you're not doing that, you're gonna have a hard time with him. He's just gonna do a little middling damage, so others can go through and kill, which is useful but not good. Ernest, he's another knight that you get in the strew of other knights. Despite having the coolest portrait out of pretty much anybody, my good old emo knight here, he's a level 8 knight that you get after everybody else. Like, you get a ton of these guys all at the same time, or all one right after another. Vankar has 2 battles over him, and he's level 8. I don't know why they keep giving you these guys. But I think in the end, he ends up being one of being the highest attack, besides Arthur, possibly with his spiking, out of all the knights in the end game, but you do have to get to that point. If you saw through my playthrough, I was using him, and he was okay with the Devil Lance, so with the highest attack power, he was okay. Could be the part with a curse and everything, too, with leveling him up, but he just wasn't the most useful. and Knights, like when you're able to use him for first few battles, he's probably okay to use, and then he starts getting into terrain, so he suffers like everybody else. And so it just takes him a while to get up to there, and that's why these will rank over him. He ranks over Venkar, because I think he actually ends up being better than Venkar for most of the time that you have him. Venkar only has 2 battles over him. Maybe gains a level or 2, and they end up being about the same afterwards. So he can end up being better in the end game, and that's worth a little bit more at this point than the 2 battles that Venkar has over. Next, you have Lyle. Lyle goes right up to B tier. There's going to be a lot that's over in B tier. There's a good reason for it. Lyle, I mean, that's kind of like our good midpoint. Is between B and C, there's going to be a ton. There's not a lot that I would say are crap, but has AUs. Lyle is the best archer that you have. Now, he does suffer through terrain, which is the battle that you get him through, which is a problem. But in the open maps, he has a lot more movement than the archers, so it kind of balances out pretty well at that point in time. You're going to have a mix of those. Pretty much every other battle is going to have high terrain from now on. Up until the end game, and then you don't have any, which is great. He ends up having the highest attack out of your archers. He will probably have the same attack as your archers at level 8, right before the Kayn battle, than these guys that are either promoted or, like level 15 or 16 or something like that. The same attack. With half the levels. And he's going to gain more attack than them. So, he's instantly better. He takes no effort to be useful at that moment. And he becomes better than those. And he has a lot more levels to gain, so he's going to gain a lot of levels as you go through the battle. And he's just so easy to use. He automatically has that 2 to 3 range. So, besides his survivability, because his survivability is pretty low, although he gains a decent amount of HP, which is good for the end game, he's just so useful for that portion, for that end game. So the mid game is like, and then he goes good. But he's already better than these guys. It takes no effort. I would say that he ranks lower than these guys because they're reliable. They're like these guys more reliable through. There's a lot of uses for him, so he is a reliable unit. He just, has, survivability issues at that time. And then he becomes okay with his survivability later on, and becomes an awesome 2 to 3 range guy. So that's why I rank him over here. Blue, I love Blue, and you get him at level 9, so an improvement over, a bunch of other guys you just got. But I'm gonna rank him pretty low here, unfortunately. And the reason is that Blue's attack is pretty low when you get him. He can be used, but it's pretty low when you get him. You get him at level 9. He is a flyer, which is good. He has a lower movement for the flying, again, which is unfortunate. But he doesn't have a weapon, and so he doesn't benefit from the stability that gives him. And he can become pretty shaky on his attack. And if you saw through my playthrough, without any grinding, he's kind of he's pretty weak as you play him. And it wasn't until the last 2 battles that he finally was kind of coming into his own and dealing some damage. And that's kind of a problem. So if you're doing a playthrough like that, which normal people are going to try to do, Blue's just not going to be that great for you. With some grinding, though, he's going to be okay. He's going to have a high defense, he's going to have high HP, and he'll have an okay attack. And because he's a flyer, that makes him pretty decent. It takes a bit to get him up to that. And we've had enough of those units. There's a lot of good, solid units that just outclass him at that time, and beyond that. So that's why he ranks pretty low here. But he still has some uses, and you can have a pretty good flying team with Balbaroy, Eamon, Kokichi, and Blue, and Domingo. and you can have that entire flying squad go forward. And if you grind up a little bit, you know, Kokichi's going to be pretty good, Domingo's going to be good, and Blue's going to be good, with these two always being good to go up there. And you have this great flying squad into there. Aleph, so she's the third of the mages. She has, the fourth mage. She has Bolt as her level 4 that she gets. She gets Freeze 2, Blaze 2, and Bolt up to level 4. I'm going to rank her down into the C tier. I don't think I originally had her like that, but I will put her down the C tier. And here's the reason, is that by this point in time, these two definitely have their level 3s. Getting to level 4s, at least. If not having level 4 is Teo. Andre might not have her level 4 yet. And of course, she has like level 2s at this time. You get her at like level, you finally get a higher level person, but it's still pretty under level. I think she's either level 14, or sorry, 15 or 16. And although she gets the most damage dealing spell at some point in time at Bolt 4, it takes her forever to get to it. She has to gain a lot of levels for it. And she's not extremely useful all the way up to that, because Bolt 3 is just an expensive Bolt 2 that does a bit more damage, and it's just not worth it. And so you're just dealing some damage to a lot of enemies. And that's it. You can't take anything out on your own. Vice, these two that can do a good amount of damage to multiple enemies, or they could take somebody out. And that's the difference. And because she's so far behind in levels still, she just has a lot of problems that come with that. Now, I rank her over Blue because she does have more levels anyway, and can get to being, you know, the most damage-dealing magic user that you have, which is phenomenal against the endgame stuff. So, with the same amount of grinding that it takes Blue to get good, she ends up being probably better with her spells. And she is more reliable for leveling up, because she has spells. So she can do an automatic set amount of damage against enemies, where Blue cannot. So she is easier to level up. And that's why she ranks a little bit higher. She has a good amount of uses if you grind, but otherwise I wouldn't take her as a mage. Then we have Tarasu, and he's going to be the last unit that's over in the B tier. I'm going to rank him lower than Chris. So here's the things with Tarasu. So Tarasu has the best spell set as a healer. He has Shield, which is a phenomenal spell that I'm finding now as a veteran with this game. Is extremely useful. It protects against magic. It basically causes no magic to affect you, which is great against magic users. Sucks if you're trying to heal your own unit, or boost them, but otherwise good. He gets Aura up to level 4, which is the best spell for the healers. It heals everybody at their to their max HP at the same cost as a heal 4, which only heals one person right next to you up to max, which is stupid. So he has the best spell set for the healers, and he comes at level 16, so a little bit under leveled at the time. But to be quite honest, you could pick him up as your sole healer at that point, and he'll be as useful as your other ones. Chris, I say, is a little bit more useful because I think she'll have Aura 2 before Tarasu has Aura 2. And she'll probably have more MP than him because she'll be higher level because you've had so many chapters in between. But Tarasu is not far behind, and you took no effort to get him to that point. So if your healers are just not doing well, or you didn't really need a healer, and then now you're thinking you want a healer, picking up Tarasu at this point in time is the best choice that you have over trying to get somebody up. And like I said, he took no effort to get to that point. And he's level 16. I think Aleph is level 15 when you get her, and he's level 16. So he has only a few levels before he gets up to level 20. You then promote him. He's so easy to level up because of the Aura spell. So he's going to be fine. He's just not as reliable as the other ones because he comes in at such a low level. at a point where whatever healer you're using is probably higher level, but he's not really that far behind. So that's why he does rank up here. I like Tarasu a lot more now, and I didn't like him before, because I grinded a ton when I was a kid, and I was like, whoa, he's way behind, I don't want to grind for him, and now I'm knowing I didn't even need to do that. He was going to be better than the others. Never grinded for low. Low sucked. And then we get to this trio. So you have Musashi. Musashi is an S tier, and here's the reason why he's an S tier. Despite the fact that he has a 4 movement, he has a high defense, almost like Guns. He has high HP and a super high attack. And it took no effort. He's level 10 promoted. You're not really looking for him to grow, but he doesn't need to, because you can pick him up, and you could not level him up all the way through, bring him to Dark Dragon, and he will still be one of your better attackers. No other unit can do that. No other unit can do that. This unit is just so reliable. The only problem that he has is his movement, but otherwise, he is a phenomenal unit. Super survivable, super attacky. This guy is the most reliable character that you can pick up. He is one of the best characters that you can have even at the time that you pick him up. Even if you grind it, he's one of the better units. And that's saying something. So, Musashi is in the top tier. Easy, very easy to use. I wish he could have more movement. So that's really his downside. So he has flaws, but I can't see myself ranking him any lower, because he's just so good when you get him and through the rest of the game, and you don't even need to do anything with him. You could use him at the end. That's just phenomenal. No other unit can do that. But then you have the exact opposite, Adam. In the F tier, you get this. I thought that this game was done giving you units that were under-leveled and unpromoted, and then you get Adam. So he's at a level 10 unpromoted after you've gotten Tarasu and Aleph, which is just so stupid. And this unit is weak as hell. So weak. He's just terrible. I did my only grinding in my playthrough just for fun. I didn't need to do it. I did it just for fun for Adam, to get him up to promotion. And at that point in time, I had some units that were only a couple levels beyond promotion, and were still kind of holding their own. At that time, the only thing that he had was he had some defense. Otherwise, his stats were crap after promotion. If you grinded him, and you got him up to level 20 promoted, then up to level 20 afterwards, compare him to every other unit even, he is still slow movement, kind of tanky, still not up to the highest levels of tankiness, with no weapon attack. The only thing that he has going for him is that he's a robot, and he has a cool animation when he does his crit using his laser beam. Otherwise, he is absolute trash. And just for fun, I'm ranking him lower than Yogurt, because Yogurt is supposed to be bad. Supposed to be so bad. He's literally the worst. They gave him the lowest stats that you could possibly give in the game as a joke. As a joke unit. And you know what? He's better, because he at least can provide you some entertainment on the way. Adam is a slow trudge to get him to something that can be kind of used. Yogurt, if you get a kill with him, if you can manage to do that, which is probably just as easy as giving Adam a kill, you get a ring for it, and you can turn your entire team into hamsters. I rate that as a better use of my time and efforts than putting into Adam. It's so bad. And I like the idea of Adam, and I used to love him as a kid, because I grinded everything, and I was like, oh, well, I want my robot that can shoot laser beams and stuff. And that's the reason. That was the reason. I never said that he was a good unit. Never. Alright, and then we got to go to our last unit, Hanzo. He comes in as a promoted unit already. He's got awesome movement with 7. He just doesn't fly. He comes in with a Doom Blade, but I'm going to assume that he has a katana in this case. So he has a decent amount of attack. He doesn't have a super high attack, but he has enough attack to get through a lot of the end game stuff. He isn't going to be one of your highest attackers. He has a lot of movement. His survivability is a little he's got enough to get through, but he's not anything like how Luke or Quart's going to be, or some of your knights. Maybe about some of the level of some of the knights, maybe just a little bit lower. But he has some spells. He has shield is probably the biggest one that he has that is very useful, that he can get later on, and so he's the thing that the reason why I'm gonna put him over here is that despite all of that I just said, when I went through and used him through my playthrough, so taking, you know, the basically the last 11 characters plus max, he was actually one of my better units because he had a high movement, he had a good amount of attack still, it took no effort to get to there, and he had the shield spell, which really helped against Dark Dragon. And against some of the other bosses would be good too. And so he's just a very reliable unit that you have right off the bat. He isn't as tanky and doesn't have the attack that Musashi has, but Hanzo is still really reliable with no effort. And he has some good capabilities. And so I have to rank him as A. I don't think I would otherwise, after this playthrough, I don't think I would have otherwise ranked him at A. I think I would have put him over at B, maybe over at C. But when you're not grinding, and when you're just using these last characters, it just knowing that, like, I just picked him up, and he was one of my better characters. Like, I can't say that he ranks any lower than A. And that high movement really is effective. That's where these two are kind of competing. I still put Musashi as an S because you get him earlier, and with Hanzo, he's still just not doing enough to be great against Dark Dragon right off the bat. He takes a couple levels, which he'll get a couple levels in the battles that he has. But Musashi, you need nothing, and he's still going to be the best attacker. So when I compare or one of the better attackers, and when I compare that, I'm like, okay, yeah, Musashi still gets it because he can be brought to the end game boss and be good. Hanzo is like, no, you need a couple of levels, but you'll get there. He's still good in the battles that he has. In either case, here's my final rankings. It's a little bit lopsided, more towards the middle, and it's a lot harder to get up or down. But I think that this is an appropriate setting in here. I don't think anything is like Arthur. I don't think I can, even Low, I don't think I can bring him down to that point, because you could still use Low and he's going to be fine. He's still going to do well for you. And then I can't bring myself, unfortunately, to bring some guys higher up here. But please let me know what you think about my tier list. What do you agree with? What do you disagree with? What factors do you think I'm not taking into consideration here? I think I've got pretty much everything covered on my end, but I could be missing something. But leave a comment down below of what you think, and subscribe if you like my content. You'll be seeing a Shining Force 2 one come up after I'm done with the Let's Play. I know this one is a long one coming out, but one, it's a long game, and two, it's just whenever I can get time for it. Luckily, I've got a lot of time now, and we'll see one eventually come out. And that one's going to be a little bit different. In either case, my name's been Magnus. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.